I'm Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. Today on the couch, I'm so excited to welcome author Mandy Merriman to talk about her new book, I'll Bring the Cake, Recipes for Every Season and Every Occasion. Now, in this episode, Mandy shares her journey in creating her baking book and her approach to making cake baking accessible to all skill levels. She also talks about organizing the book by seasons, and she also talks about her expertise in cake decorating. Mandy humors me and we play a fun game about what cake she'd bring to some famous dinner parties in classic literature, and she even shares some great book recommendations. Also in this episode, you'll learn valuable cake baking tips and tricks, from perfecting buttercream to alternative methods for testing cake doneness. I promise you, Mandy's insights will inspire and empower you to say, I'll bring the cake to your next event or gathering. So let's get into the episode so you can join us on this sweet conversation with author Mandy Merriman. Where were you the last weekend of April 2023? Well, I don't know about you, but hundreds of readers and myself had a fantastic 3 days at the Spring Summer EPIGRAPH Literary Festival. It was really a great time. Oh my gosh. Authors were sharing about their new books. I was laughing so hard during the happy hours, and I learned so many new things at our lifestyle-themed sessions. So, if you missed the festival, or you want to relive the highlights, visit epigraphLitFest.com and select replays. That's epigraphLitFest.com and select replays. Your TBR will explode, you'll learn a thing or two, and you'll have lots of laughs, especially at those happy hour sessions. So go to epigraphLitFest.com and select replays. Hi readers, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me is a former food blogger turned all-around cake lover who inspires so many people. She really helps them build their cake baking confidence through her weekly tutorials. But she's here on the couch with me to talk about her new book, I'll Bring the Cake. Please welcome to the couch, Mandy Merriman. Hi, Mandy. Welcome to the Reader's Couch.
Hi, Victoria. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here today.
Yay! I am so excited to have you here. Absolutely loved your book. But now that it's out here in the world and readers can get their hands on a copy, I mean, how are you feeling, Mandy? How excited are you?
Thank you. It's been an overwhelming feeling of just gratitude mixed in with excitement, mixed in with just all this pent-up anticipation finally releasing. And it's been a wonderful journey so far. And man, the cookbook is so much work, but it's so fun to see all the work being paid off by just seeing bakers already jumping into their kitchens and turning on their ovens and jumping right in. So it's been really fun so far.
Absolutely, absolutely. And readers, I'm telling you, you are going to be inspired by this book. Mandy just did an amazing job putting it all together. But I want you to hear it straight from her before I start gushing about it. Mandy, tell our listeners about your book, I'll Bring the Cake, and what can they expect when they pick up your book?
Absolutely. So my book, I'll Bring the Cake, is actually started from just my family setting where we would do a family gathering, and being someone who usually has extra cake slices lying around, I was usually the one to bring the cake. And so I thought this would be a fun bounce off of my last cookbook, Cake Confidence, where we built that confidence in the kitchen and making cakes. And this is an extension of that, to be the one to confidently say that you'll be the one to bring the cake to gatherings, events, weddings, whichever you're bringing cake to. And I really wanted to create a cookbook that was accessible to everyone, whether you're a new baker or a more seasoned baker in the baking community, that you'd be able to find a new go-to cake book that would have recipes for every season throughout the year. So it's organized by seasons. And then as well as have holiday cakes with tutorials and basically a cake class at the beginning to teach you how to make a cake from start to finish. And then the recipes in it are just so fun and fun and approachable. And I just think they're delicious and delicious to look at, delicious to eat, fun to make. And it has been such a fun journey making this book and coming up with new inventive flavors, but also flavors that are ones that we would love to celebrate with all year round. So I think this overall is just a go-to cake book for any caker who's just barely dipping their toe into the water or those who have been baking for years. I think it's for everyone.
I couldn't agree with you more. I loved when you said this book is approachable because I read and cook from so many different baking books, so many different cookbooks. But what I loved about this one is that literally anyone can pick up this book and just bake one cake straight off the bat without, too much effort, too much fuss. So you mentioned Cake Confidence. And while I'm not familiar with that book, I would love for you to share Cake Confidence with listeners, but also tell us about what really inspired you to make this new book. Because yes, you have Cake Confidence out there. I would love to hear about it. But what made you decide to organize a book in seasons? Because I love it, but what was the inspiration for it?
Yes. So Key Confidence was my first book, and I really enjoyed making that book. And it was very successful and was a great learning experience for me about publishing and recipe creation and the whole process. And so it was soon after that book was released that I just knew that I still had more recipes in me. I knew I still had more to share with my baking community and bakers around the world. And so this is a very thick book. I'll bring the cake. It's a heavy, giant book full of recipes, over 100 different recipes. So obviously, I had a lot more to say about cake, and so this book is just an extension of that. And I loved how it came together. And while I was making the book, I was thinking about how I would organize all these recipes that I had developed and photographed and tasted. And I thought, what a fun way to approach caking then throughout the year. So baking is normally something that I find my readers clinging on to the most during the cozy winter months. But here in Utah, we definitely have all the seasons. We have a sufficient spring, we have a very hot summer, a beautiful fall, and then we have just a very brutal, snowy winter. And so while I was making these recipes, I thought, it would be so fun to be able to just approach caking by season and find ingredients that are going to be the most tasty and at the peak of their flavor, and then bake throughout the season that way. So if you're getting this book in fall, or if you're getting it in summer or spring or winter, whatever season you're at, you'll have a bunch of, like, I think it's 10 to 15 recipes per chapter that you'd be able to start with. And then obviously seasons are different throughout the year around the world. So that was a little tricky to approach, but I figured they're organized at least in a way that readers can find maybe the flavors they're looking for, and the type of flavor profiles, especially like, for instance, there's more like tropical, warm, summery flavors in my summer chapter. And then fall has more of those dark, sultry, cozy seasonal flavors that you would find around the holiday baking time. And so I thought that it was kind of a no brainer to think, what, let's put these into seasons. And then within each season chapter, every season has some holidays in there. So I thought, in addition to these seasonal flavors, we would have some tutorials on techniques for fun holiday cakes. And so when you hit some of the holidays that we hit in the winter, like Christmas or Thanksgiving or Halloween, you would be able to have a fun tutorial on how to make a more themed cake that is more heavy in the technique versus flavor. And you'd have a step-by-step tutorial on how to do that too. So that's kind of how we organized it. And that was the kind of the mastermind plan behind I'll Bring the Cake, is that you'll be able to bring the cake throughout the entire year instead of just a particular baking season.
Well, I absolutely loved it, and it was just the perfect fit for me because I do seasonal reading. So I felt so inspired. I'm like, okay, I do seasonal reading. I make seasonal reading guides for readers. Why shouldn't I do a seasonal cake? So I absolutely loved it. I think it's a perfect fit, especially for readers like me. We tend to do things seasonally. Now we have sweets that are just really easy to make and just very approachable. And one thing that readers will find throughout all your recipes is the fact that all these beautiful creations were made using cake mixes. However, of course, you've added extra ingredients in there. So outside of the usual, water, oil, eggs that you'd see on a box cake mix package, you add in some extra ingredients in there as well. Now, I want to know, Mandy, what would you say to listeners who might think using boxed cake is cheating, or that there's no way this could be, as good as something made from scratch? What would you say?
Ooh, I love to hear it. At first, when I put out my first book, there was some backlash. I think that a lot of people thought that if you baked from a box mix, that maybe you weren't baking especially from scratch, or that you weren't a real baker because it was some kind of shortcut or crutch or quick way to make a cake that wasn't, I don't know, as superior, I guess, as maybe making it from scratch. And oh my goodness, Victoria, I do so much scratch baking. I love it. It's my favorite thing to do. But when I wanted to step into this cake world, I wanted it to be as approachable as possible. And what I loved about trying the box mix method, which is what you described, I think you described it perfectly. So what we do is you use the box mix as a pre-measured dry ingredient packet. And then what you do is you add to it sour cream, buttermilk, egg whites. You add in extracts, emulsions, freeze-dried fruit, fresh ingredients, things like that, that make the cake taste like it's from scratch, even though you took a wonderful shortcut and you still yielded that beautifully delicious result. And at first, it would hurt my feelings when people would say that it, maybe was a lesser way to get the same result. But the more taste testing I did with my recipes against maybe other scratch recipes, I learned that people actually do prefer the taste and the texture and the ease of using the doctored cake mix method. And a lot of bakeries around the world do the same thing. And so it's been fun to just decide that, hey, this will be a fun platform to go off of. And I believe in this product, or the way that it yields beautiful results, without as much of the guesswork, I think, that can sometimes come from scratch baking. There's less that can go wrong. It's going to perform beautifully every single time. And it's also very easy to make the cake, first of all. And I think sometimes it's nice to have an easy recipe that you can work on, maybe focusing more on the decorating, and know already that, hey, from Mandy's cookbook here, I know that the cake is going to taste good. Let's focus on the decorating or the way that it looks as well, knowing that the taste is already taken care of. And so I think that my advice to them would be to, hey, just give it a try. I mean, don't knock it till you try it. Maybe do your own taste testing in your kitchen, and then decide then, if it's the approach that you want to take to baking. I think that everyone, whether they're in the kitchen baking a cake, when people are enjoying that cake afterward, they don't usually ask the baker, hey, is this from scratch? Or hey, is this from a box? They usually go off of what it tastes like. And I'm very confident that these recipes taste like they're from scratch, if even better. And so it's been fun to kind of convert people over to the dark side and say, hey, like this box mix method actually has something to it. And I think that it's resonating with a lot of bakers. And so I'm not afraid to, I don't know, to share this method. And if they do try it and it's not for them, hey, at least they tried it, and they're willing to step outside of their comfort zone and do something new. And I'm all for that too. So it's kind of a win all around.
Absolutely. And you know what? My philosophy has always been there's no one way to do it. And this gives me a quick, easy way. To your point, I know it's going to taste good, cooking straight from your book. I can spend more time on decorating and making it look good. I love that. Also, in the reading community, we've often talked about is listening to audiobooks reading. Is reading from a Kindle the same thing as reading from, a physical paper book? So I'm of the belief there's no one way to do things. So in the same way, we can read and consume books in different ways. I think we can bake in different ways too.
Oh, I'm a firm believer in that. And I'm glad that you said that as well, because I was thinking about the books that I've read lately, or books that were from my childhood, or books that I've consumed as I've grown up, or books that have just become a part of me. And most of those books have actually been put into my brain and into my life and into my heart by listening to them. And it's
Mhm.
while I'm making cakes that I listen to most of my podcasts and audiobooks. And so while I was making this cookbook, I listened to so many books, and it was because I needed my eyes on my cake, but my ears were wide open listening to that book. And I feel like whether I was reading it through the page or listening to it, I would have enjoyed it just as much. And so it's been fun to have book listening be a part of the book writing process.
I absolutely love this. I am grinning from ear to ear because I've often said, you can listen to an audiobook when you're walking your dog or doing your
Yeah,
chores, doing a puzzle. Now we can do it when we're baking.
right? It's so relaxing to listen to I oh my goodness, I listened to a lot of Gershom while I made my book and things like that
Mhm.
too. A lot of World War II books, and it was just fun to when I see those books in print in this book, my brain has that memory of a book I was listening to while I was making that cake. So it's been kind of a flood of memories to look through the pages too. And yeah, so I totally believe that whether you're reading it or listening to it, you're enjoying, and that's the point. So
Absolutely. Love it, Mandy. Okay, we're going to shake things up on the podcast and we're going to play a little game.
ooh,
Now, so
excited.
this game was inspired 100% by the title of your book. So we're going to play Mandy Will Bring the Cake.
Victoria, I love this.
Yay, it's going to be fun. So I'm going to tell you about 6 memorable parties in classic literature, and you're going to tell me what cake you would bring to the party. Are you ready?
Ooh, I love this. Okay, let's go.
Okay, all right. So the first one is okay, so Charles Dickens wrote a book called David Copperfield, and in that book, David had a London dinner party. So let me tell you, he was really anxious to host this party. He really wanted to bring all his friends around, so he orders way too much food, too many bottles of wine. He starts off the evening shy, and then, of course, he ends up intoxicated. It was just a good old time. What cake would you bring to this party?
Ooh, I don't know. When I think of like holiday parties in the David Copperfield era, I think of like I don't know, like Dickens, and I think of Christmas time. So I would definitely bring some kind of gingerbread cake to this party. And I think that it would be frosted in some kind of like cream cheese buttercream with some fun, fresh cranberries on top. I'm not personally a wine drinker, but I would say that, hey, if we needed to soak the cake layers and any of that leftover stuff, I think that would be a really fun way to add that to the filling of the cake, but also could be served alongside the cake.
Yay, I love it. Okay, the next party is a costume ball. Now, this is in my favorite book, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, and it's a yearly tradition. They have this ball at this estate. It's called Mandalay, and this is the first grand affair our narrator is having at Mandalay. But instead of it being a really great time, she was tricked by her housekeeper to dress up in an outfit that the man's first wife wore. It was just a bad outfit day, but it's a ball people in the community look forward to. What would you bring to this costume ball?
Ooh, I would bring okay, so when I think of like a ball and masquerade, I think of like over the top embellishments on everything. And so I think for this one, we could not settle for a one-tiered cake. We would need to bring something with at least 2 or 3 tiers piled up high, and we would have intricate details all over it. And I think on the inside, it would be so fun. I have a New Year's Eve cake in my cookbook. I'll bring the cake, and it has black and white stripes that are just
Mhm.
bold and bright, and it has big gumballs on it that are gold. I think that like rich, gorgeous, lush embellishment on the side would match the party beautifully.
Absolutely. I love it. I remember that one in the book. Yes. Okay, number 3. Next party is the Mad Hatter's Tea Party in Alice in Wonderland. So we know this one is a popular children's book. It's a tea party. The Mad Hatter. It's just it's we have the hare, we have the mouse, we have all the people there. What would you bring to the Mad Hatter's Tea Party?
Ooh, my goodness. Okay, so I have a really fun okay, so there's 2 cakes that I have in my brain right now. This is just off the bat. I have a pink velvet cake with giant pink hearts on the side that look a little I don't know, they aren't really straight, they're kind of a little wonky. It's kind of a fun like bold pattern that I would imagine being on the tablecloths, on the teacups, things like
Yeah.
that. So I would bring something like that. Or I have a whole, I think I'm thinking of the spring cakes and the florals. I have a, like when I think of the Mad Hatter Tea Party, I think of flowers and Alice in Wonderland. And I think that it would be so fun to have either a rose water cake at that
Hmm.
or we could totally do the lavender one because when I associate lavender, I think of like being sleepy and Alice going through the motions of her journey through Wonderland and how she's sleepy at sometimes she's awake, she's big, she's tiny, and just kind of maybe associating that with just the flavors that would be served at that party.
Yes, I actually thought of the lavender cake in your book.
We're on the same page.
Yes, we definitely are. Okay. The next one is Saturday Night Parties, hosted by Jay Gatsby from The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. We all know just how over the top Gatsby's parties were. Every Saturday night, folks would come in from all over to show up to his big mansion, and just everything was over the top. What cake would Mandy bring?
Ooh, I would bring. So when I think of Gatsby, I really think of those black and whites, but especially golds and shimmery sparkles and in like really beautiful, just over the top, lush, rich environment. And I think it would be so yummy to have either like a really dark chocolate or even a black velvet cake, and then to have either gold buttercream or gold drip on the outside of the cake. And of course, we would pile everything on that cake as possible. We could put a mask on it. We could put pearls. We could have feathers coming out of the top. It would be so fun to just have an over the top, just maybe a little too over the top, but still tastefully done cake served at that party.
I think Gatsby and over the top go together in the same sentence. So,
Yes.
absolutely. Okay, so the last party on my list is going to be Clarissa's Party in Mrs. Dalloway, a book by Virginia Woolf. The book opens with this woman busying herself about, she's having a dinner party at her home. So it's, it's a more smaller, intimate gathering. She goes to the shops, she gets flowers, she gets all the fixings she'll need for dinner. So this is more of a small, intimate gathering, and throughout the book, we're seeing what she's doing, preparing for the party. So what would you bring to, I guess, this small, intimate house party?
I think that it would have to be a smaller cake with big flavor. And when I think of just gathering together with my friends, or even just for a small, intimate dinner together, I really would love something that's not too much, but still something that I think would be lovely to serve at the end of maybe a wonderful meal with those that I've gathered around. I really love my almond cake with the raspberry buttercream. It has fresh raspberries right in the buttercream, and you could put fresh almonds on top and little raspberry bits everywhere. I think it would just be a lovely slice to have on a plate to serve to friends and family.
Absolutely love it. Thank you so much for playing our game.
So fun. Oh my goodness. I love that.
Yay. Okay, so let's get back to I'll Bring the Cake. How long did it take for you to kind of pull this book together? And what was your publishing journey like?
Yes, that's a great question. So I already have, I feel like I always tell people that I already have a lot of tabs open in my brain. There's lots of lists that are always ongoing. And so for I'll Bring the Cake, it was so nice to be able to go through that entire list that I just feel like it never ends of fun new cake flavors I'd love to try, cake combinations that have just been marinating in my mind. And so what I did was started about 2.5 years ago. I signed my book deal 2 years ago though. And that's when I began the journey of recipe development and trying my recipes, making sure that they taste just right and that they're also easy and that can be easily replicated in kitchens across the world. And so for this recipe developing process, which is equally as frustrating as it is fulfilling, sometimes it worked out great the first time, sometimes it took a few more times. And so for me, something that was different that I did that I don't think a lot of authors do is that I not only wrote everything, so I wrote all the blurbs for every cake had a story or a feeling or
Mhm.
something that I wanted to share. So I needed to write those out. And then I also needed to photograph all of the cakes that I personally made. So I didn't hire any food stylists or any food photographers. I did it all by myself in my kitchen. So every picture you see in this book was photographed by me, and edited by me, and styled by me. And every cake was personally made by me. And that was, oh my goodness, that was a process in itself. And we ended up, I think I submitted like easily over 120 recipes, and we ended up with a little under 100 in the book. And so it ended up still being a pretty large book filled to the brim with wonderful recipes. And so after I submitted my manuscript, it was a lot of back and forth with my publisher, just the editors, making sure that what I had written makes sense, that I think that a lot of times I take for granted when I write out a measurement or a method of mixing that I do. And the publishers were really good at going back and saying, hey, for someone who's just barely stepping into the kitchen and maybe frosting their first cake of their entire life, how would you explain it maybe differently or in a more easy way for them to understand, while having me kind of take their hand and guide them along the process as well, just in my own style. And so that was a cool way to approach this book. And so that was a huge process of it, is the back and forth, and making sure that, I don't know, everything made sense, and that everything, if someone's baking this book through the book, that they can easily replicate what they see. And then also a big part of this book was making sure there was troubleshooting. So if someone did run into issues, that they have like that they know that I have their back, and that there's a whole section there to explain how to fix it or what to do next, or maybe what to look for next time, and to remind our bakers and myself along the process that if it's not right the first time, we learned something and there's an opportunity to try it again and to take that knowledge and apply it to the next cake. And so the publishing process was quite a long time. And I didn't realize in the publishing world that things move very slowly. I'm a very fast paced individual. I like things to, I don't know, every morning I make a list and I get everything done. And it was weird to have maybe a month or two go by without hearing anything, but knowing that, hey, things are still happening. And this is just kind of the process in the publishing world. And so I learned a lot of patience, and also learning that because of that patience, it made the release of the book that much more sweet. And it made it more fulfilling, I think. And so it was a longer process than I anticipated, but I think it has been so fulfilling to see this book and to hold it in my hands, and to know that bakers will be able to do so as well.
Yep, absolutely. And again, it's just, if I had to think of one word to describe your book, it was approachable. I did feel like you were holding our hands. There's a whole section, you guys, dedicated to baking tips and troubleshooting, in addition to some essentials that we need to know. So I'm just going to solicit some quick tips from you for our listeners.
Yeah.
What are the 3 decorating tools that you could not do without?
Ooh, I really love my cake turntable. So that's just the heavy metal bottom, and you can put your cake on it and spin it around while you're frosting. That makes it so easy to make clean sides. It's so hard to do it without, but I mean, it's obviously doable. But for me, having that turntable, it was a great first step. So I usually recommend that. And then also, I really recommend having a cake scraper. So it looks like a rectangle metal piece, and you hold it in your hand and you hold it against the side of the cake really gently as you spin your turntable. And what that does is it makes a really flat side on all the sides of your cake. So it's nice and smooth, nice and decadent. And having that tool really makes a difference, versus using maybe a butter knife or something else. And then maybe my last one would be a offset icing spatula, which is just a cake tool that's kind of bent on the side, kind of like a bent knife, a bent butter knife, I guess, with a handle is how I would describe it. And you can use it to make clean edges on the sides of the cake, but also to frost things that are parallel to your cake. So the inside of the cake, the top of your cake, and those 3 tools. I mean, it's possible to frost cakes without these tools, obviously. Sometimes all you need is a butter knife or a spoon or something, but they definitely make it a lot easier on you as you're trying to step into cake land and frost your cakes.
And there's a whole chapter dedicated to decorating tools, the must-haves and the extras. And what 3 cake baking tools you can't do without? So not decorating, but just baking.
Okay, so baking tools. So obviously, having a good set of cake pans is a really good helpmate as you're baking in the kitchen. I think sometimes the type of pan we buy can either help us or it can hinder our progress in the kitchen. So I like a good set of. I really enjoy baking with 6-inch cake pans, but you can obviously do 8-inch or use a bundt pan or put my recipes in to a 9 by 13 pan as well, like a sheet cake. That's a lot more approachable too. So I think having a good set of pans is helpful. I think also when you're baking, this isn't necessarily a tool, but a tip is to make sure that your oven is baking at the temperature it says it's baking at. So I set my oven for 325, and if I put a thermometer in there and it's saying 315 or 350, obviously that's going to change what my cake looks like when it's baking. So it's nice to be able to, so maybe an oven thermometer just to make sure that your cake is baking at the right temperature. Those would probably be my top two. And then also having a proper cooling rack. So after your cake bakes, you can flip those cake rounds out of the pan so they stop baking and they can cool completely before you start stacking and assembling your cake.
Amazing. And also, the good thing with Mandy's book is that you can make whatever cake you want. She tells you about the timing differences for the cupcakes, the bonds, the sheet pan, the 10-inch, the 8-inch, the 6-inch. Everything is in there. Again, this book is just super approachable. But what I think I was super excited to see, because I know my husband is absolutely going to love it. He loves a good buttercream frosting.
Yay!
So, yes, he does. So, what are the 3 buttercream frosting tips you think bakers should know?
Okay, so Victoria, I love buttercream so much, and I think your husband and I are kindred spirits because I feel like buttercream is what takes the cake.
Yeah.
It adds beautiful flavor and texture to your cake layers. And so the main tips I would have for buttercream, because I feel like I do get the most questions from my followers about buttercream, is the texture. We want our texture to be nice and smooth, and there's a couple tips that I'll tell you real quick that can help you make that work out. So the first one is to make sure that your butter isn't too cold when you start. You want it to sit out at room temperature for maybe about 10 minutes before you start. If your butter is too cold, it won't mix properly. And if it's too warm, then your buttercream is going to be too soft and too mushy. So the temperature is key. The next tip I have is a lot of people make their buttercream, they add in all the ingredients, they add in their powdered sugar, and then they whip it up for maybe 30 seconds and think, okay, this is ready for the cake. But that's when I jump in and I say, wait, 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 wait. Let's turn your mixer on high speed for about a minute or two and let that mixer whip that buttercream until it's soft and light and fluffy. And what that does is that makes the most incredible buttercream texture by incorporating more air bubbles into your buttercream. And that way you're able to smooth it nice and smoothly on the side of your cake. So that little extra tip can change the whole texture of your buttercream in a really delicious way. The third tip I would have is that when you do whip it up at high speed, it does incorporate those air bubbles, which sometimes can be harder to smooth out. So a fun tip that I love, which my right arm thanks me very much for because I do this by hand, is I get a wooden spoon, or sorry, a large wooden stirring spoon, or I use a just any kitchen tool that I can whip something really hard with, like a spatula, and I hand beat out those air bubbles. You just more like a rapid stir in the bowl. And what that does is it gets out those air bubbles. So as you're smoothing it on the side of your cake, you don't have to fight with little pockets of space. It's like a smooth, seamless blend on the side of your cake. And that little extra trip truly makes all the difference.
Amazing. Thank you, Mandy. So, the last thing I'm going to share from the book, because again, you guys, the whole book, Mandy is holding your hand. But the thing I'm going to call my mom to tell her is this one thing I learned, which is you have a much better method than inserting a toothpick in the middle of the cake to test it for doneness, because that is what my mom has done her entire life. That's what I learned to do because I actually love baking. And that's what I saw her doing it. That's what I ended up doing. But now I think I'm going to go for your method because maybe this way it won't get too dry. Can you share it with our listeners?
Yes, and I think that a lot of our readers have heard of that method because it is one that has been used for many, many years. And I think that it was a good method when it was. But I think more recently, so the method we're talking about is when you insert a toothpick in the center of your cake after it's finished baking. Usually people look for a clean toothpick pull out so that when you pull it out, there's no little bits on it. And that lets you know that the cake is finished baking. However, and if you pull it out and there's still goopy cake batter in it, you know that it's still underbaked. But for me, though, I've noticed that when I use the toothpick method that is common in the baking community, that my cakes are dry because I've almost overbaked them in order to achieve that clean toothpick status. So what's nice is that what I look for is less of the toothpick method and more of the, hey, does it look like the center of it has baked through just by looking at it? I open the oven a tiny, tiny bit to just maybe gently touch the top to see if it's gooey. If it is, it's definitely not done. And then also, we don't want to overbake our cakes. So the longer you leave it in, I mean, if you've even left it in for 5 minutes longer than you're supposed to, the toothpick will come out clean, but your poor cake has been overbaked. So it's nice to maybe have a more reliable method like the oven temperatures that we talked about, and then just
Yeah.
making sure we don't overstir the batter and things like that to control when the cake is done.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mandy, thank you so much for all these helpful tips. I know readers will learn a lot. Aspiring bakers, experienced bakers, you'll learn a lot. But again, pick up Mandy's book. She really holds your hand. I'll bring the cake. But before we wrap things up, Mandy, I'm really curious, and I'm especially happy because you said you were listening to audiobooks when you were baking. And we love book recommendations here. So share with our listeners the last book or books that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
Oh, wonderful. So, um, it's kind of a different I jump around. I feel like my taste in books is kind of like my taste in music, where it's different for what I'm going through at that time. And so, this is within like the past 2 years, so it's kind of a wide range. Obviously, books have been listened to, lots of podcasts, things like that. But I really enjoyed A Time for Mercy by John Grisham. And I especially love the narrator because he speaks in this thick Southern accent that is just really fun to listen to. I also finished The Rose Cold by Kate Quinn and The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. I love The Nightingale, and so I've been trying to branch out to more Kristen Hanna's books. And then I listened to Beneath the Scarlet Sky by Mark Sullivan. And then I also recently went through some hard things in my life. And so I turned to more like self-help books. And so I listened to Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before by Julie Smith. And then also Love People Use Things by The Minimalists. And that's Joshua Fields Milburn and Ryan Nicodemus. And so those have been really good ones to listen to for me.
Amazing. We also love bookstores here on the podcast. Do you have a favorite local indie or maybe a childhood favorite? What's a favorite bookstore of yours?
Yes, we actually have a local bookstore that I'm doing a book signing at next week called The King's English. And it is the coziest little cottage. And when you walk in, it's wall to ceiling of books. And it is you just want to cozy up in there on a rainy day and read all day. It has a children's section, and it has so many cookbooks that just makes my heart happy to see all over the walls. And the people there are so warm and cozy and have wonderful book recommendations.
Amazing. And for my listeners, the thing I love about indies is the fact that even if you're not living in Utah, you can't go to the King's English. If you give them a ring, maybe you can get a signed copy, because indies are really good at doing that. So
I'm sure they would be happy to.
yes, absolutely. So that's a great option for folks who are out of town. But kind of to wrap things up though, Mandy, what are you hoping that readers will feel or learn after they've picked up and read and baked from I'll Bring the Cake?
My goal with I'll Bring the Cake, the main goal was I love how cake can bring families together, whether they're gathering for something small to celebrate or even a huge moment, whether that's a wedding or even just gathering as a family to celebrate a milestone, or even to gather for a mourning period or even a new arrival in the family. I think cake really does bring everyone together. And what I hoped to bring was their confidence with these recipes to be the one to gather and to find something to celebrate, even if it's just something little, to enjoy cake with those they love most.
Absolutely. Mandy, thank you so much for coming on the show and speaking with me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you as well with you, Victoria. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.